Hello and welcome back to another brand new MotoGP 22 video. Now in today's video we will be focusing on the calibration menus in the controller, how to set up the calibration, what it does and why you should really be looking at it. Also at the end, a bit of a bonus, you'll see my camera settings. I do get asked quite often what my camera settings are, so I'll just quickly run you through them at the end of the video. But just apologies, this video has taken me a lot longer due to a lot of patches to this game have changed the physics, so I want to show off what my calibrations are for my controller and for my riding style while also explaining it. But my calibrations kept changing, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't giving people kind of bad data, if that makes sense. On the previous update, basically my controls were all wrong again, so I had to adjust them. So as of right now, on the current build, my controller works. But we're going to jump into it. You can do this in the main menu. I'm going to do it in the pit lane just for ease of access for the camera later. So by pressing the pause menu button, whatever that is on your choice of controllers, come over to controls configuration, cycle over to the final menu and you'll see calibration. Now we have steering, accelerate, front brake, reverse, rear brake, clutch and rider weight. The final two, rider weight and clutch, are pretty much useless. The rider weight, you don't need to change that because it's just the rider's weight. The clutch, barely ever used on MotoGP, you only really use it on the launch. It's not going to make it any better. We're going to start off with steering. I'm just going to run down quickly and explain briefly what everything does. Dead zone, a higher dead zone, it cuts out the first input, so we're going to put the dead zone up to 30%. Also by pressing X or square if you have a PlayStation controller, you'll see now this is the steering one. So my controller, I'm pushing the stick quite a bit left and you'll see nothing is happening. And once again I'm pushing it quite far to the right, nothing's happening. Whereas if I go back and take that off, as soon as I touch the left stick, it should come up and light up a small bit. So there we go, again barely moving the stick and it's starting to light up much quicker. So that's what your dead zone does. Unless you have a really bad thumbstick, I wouldn't suggest putting one on. It's not really going to make you any quicker per se, but again, if your controller has like massive sway in it and it's starting to affect your riding, I would maybe suggest that. Linearity is the next one. That's the only one I've adjusted for the steering. The linearity changes at what point the speed of the controller moves. Now what I mean by that is if you see me here moving left to right, I have the linearity at 85% out of 200. So 100% would be complete linear, which means at one point, basically if you plot an axis, it's exactly a straight point. It's very hard to explain it on a graph, but what it means is the input is constant the whole way. It's the same as speed, it doesn't speed up or slow down. Now what I've done is slowed down the final part but increased the start of it. I found a lot of times on the MotoGP games, especially this one, that the initial part of turning is not quick enough, so I've had to sped it up. I actually used to run on 75 on the previous update, but now I've put it back to 85. I feel like that's a pretty good base. So for me, again, I'll just show it. The initial turn-in is just slightly quicker and then levels out back to what it would be a more linear approach as the more lean the bike in. So again, you're not really going to see it with the naked eye, but it's something you will definitely feel when you're riding. Saturation, this is going to be betterly used for the rear brake mainly later. But for example, we're going to just bang it up to 200%. And then I'm going to show you exactly what it does. So when I move the stick left and right, you'll have an end and start point. Pretty much by putting the saturation up, you're moving the end point way closer. So I am barely moving the stick left and I'm at 100% brake, or sorry, lean. Whereas the stick has so much more travel left in it. It's kind of pointless for steering, but it does have an impact later. So if I was to ride like this, as soon as I turn the bike, it would go to full lean. It would be almost like using a D-pad. It would be going from 0 to 100 really quick. You can see how fast it is because I'm just barely tipping in and I go straight to 100. So that would be, again, if you had a dead zone, you could kind of play around with this, but I again wouldn't suggest adjusting it for your steering. Filter pressure and filter release, they are basically smoothing out your inputs, so they'll add a bit of a delay. So your filter pressure is when you push the stick left or right, it will add a bit of a delay, and when you release the stick or the trigger or the button, there'll be a slower come off period. Will the filter release is all it does. So they're quite self-explanatory, they're not really that important. But for me, I run 0, 85, 100, 0, 0. That's a small adjustment to linearity of the steering. You can by all means try my ones, let me know how they go. Also play around yourself, don't be afraid to mess around with them. There will be definitely time in these settings to find for your riding style. Next up, we have the accelerator. Now again, dead zone 0, no need. Saturation 100, don't need to adjust that. Filter pressure, I don't want on either of them because my controller is good. I don't need to add any dead zones or anything like that. So again, you see I've changed the linearity. Now this time it's 140%. You can see the graph, it's slightly different. We're going to bring up the calibration. So we're going to just press the trigger. So my first initial part of the button press is slower. It's the exact opposite to my steering of my left stick. So as I said in the previous clip, that when I turned the bike in, it was a bit heavy and slow. I needed a quicker turn-in portion of my stick. This is the exact same, but the opposite. I wanted the initial bite of the throttle to be a bit more progressive, and even if I was to push through really aggressive on the stick like this, it'll still slow down that initial movement there, which will just give you a bit better traction, overall tire wear. You can be right a little bit more aggressive and the game won't penalize you. So again, very little change to these. You don't need to go mad and change everything. You just need to change what you need to change to get better at the game and for it to be more comfortable. Again, by all means, try out what I've done. Now, front brake. Once again, you can see very little changed. So my linearity is 100%, or sorry, my saturation 100%, dead zone 0, filter pressure 0, 0 for these boys. Linearity 130, exactly the same as the throttle. My initial braking is just smoothing out for me. It's something I do a lot on GP bikes. Just makes the inputs slower and a bit smoother for my liking. I can brake a bit more aggressive and don't need to worry as much. We're going to move swiftly on to the rear brake where it gets a bit more interesting. Now you're seeing here now I've adjusted the saturation and the filter pressure. So if I bring up my calibration menu, look how slow and steady my rear brake pressures are. Now by pushing saturation to 90 or 90% out of 200 to 50, I have not full access to the brake. So if I'm going to hold down my button, that's as much rear brake. I can only use 0.9 or 90% of my brake. What that does, it smooths out the input. I find the rear brake can be very strong on this game. Sometimes a bit too strong for my liking, so I've just taken it away a small bit. I have it bound to the right stick. Sorry, the right bumper, not the right stick, which means it's a button. I can't modulate it at all. I can only press it or be off it, which means I need to adjust it manually. So it's better that, whereas if I have a trigger, you can see, look how much I can press the trigger slowly on the front brake. The rear brake is not that same. I can tap it like that, and if I hold it, it goes to 90%. I don't know if you look how slow it is. Slow up, slow down, slow up and slow down. That's due to my filter pressure and release. They are quite high at 80, 90. That just makes my rear brake quite smooth and progressive. It's not very snappy and grabby, so it's much better. Again, like I said, I feel it's quite strong in this game, so this is just taking a bit of that bite out of the rear brake. I can be more precise with it and pretty much quicker with it. So 90, 80, 95 are my values for that, and that is pretty much for the calibration. Now I don't have anything done to the clutch. Again, the clutch, you can go higher, so you can maybe make it faster, but the thing is, right, it's only on the button press, so if you're holding it in, you've already done the input. Filter pressure release, you don't have any really clutch bite to get in this. Rider weight, you can change everything like I said in the previous. If you want to play around with it, try. For me, I don't think it's necessary at all. Now, if you do have any questions at all about these, they are a bit confusing and are quite hard to explain. So if I did do a bad job of explaining them, please let me know in the comments. Comment asking anything at all about them if you need anything explained. But I'm going to jump over now and I'm going to show you off my camera settings. So I'm in the pause menu here now. Again, you want to press the options button and you'll see in the last option, camera customization. Now it brings up a nice drop down menu here for you. You can go through your bumpers up in the top left between cameras. So I used a distant third person camera. That's my only camera person I use. There's a first person, cockpit, helmet, and I think there's a close third person. So I'm going to just run you through what I use. So field of view. At least with this I can show you all. The field of view just is how close you are to the bike and how much zoomed in the screen is. If you Google the size of your TV or monitor, you can find out what your right field of view can be. Again, it's not really massive. You can see it changes the graphics touch. I like it zoomed out further. Distance is how far away from the bike I am. I like it like that. The height, it kind of rotates, it doesn't go straight up. So for me, 3 was good. Accelerate effect, when you accelerate the camera goes back, when you brake it goes forward. Now I don't like that. There's also a kind of a buffeting effect at high speeds. Dynamic cam is a cam that kind of moves. I have it off. All these things will make you slower. They might look good when watching gameplay, but they're not actually good to use. Off track vibration, so if I run off the track my controller will go berserk. I've turned off. I know if I'm off track. Long lap cam, basically when you go into long lap penalty, which is what LLP stands for, you'll be given a separate more above the bike camera angle. I think it's, what happens is they kind of slowly transition into it, so it kind of really throws off the physics a bit. I don't like it at all, and that is pretty much it. So again, any questions about these, hit me up in the comments below. But that is going to be it for today's episode of Explained. If you have enjoyed, please consider subscribing to the channel, drop a like down below, and I should see you all in the not so distant future. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.